Hello everyone and welcome to the FinTech Times. You're back with Tyler and I'm still here at Pay360 and today I'm joined by Ciara. Ciara, how are you?
I am well, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Are you enjoying the event?
I am loving it. We've definitely got the weather for it.
Yes, if only there was some sort of skylight in here or something.
Absolutely.
Or we should have taken this interview outside.
100%.
Oh, if only you could see the sun right now. We can't, so it doesn't matter. So, Ciara, why don't you tell our viewers a bit about who you are, where you've come from, what's going on?
Yeah. So my name's Ciara Conway. I've been working in architecture and technology for the last 22 years, specialising in the payments industry over the last probably about 10 years. I have recently gone, perhaps to the dark side, I don't know, but I have recently moved out of payments into insurance and have taken up the Group Chief Architecture role at AVIVA. So really hoping to actually see that spirit of innovation, look at really how I can bring that to life within the insurtech market.
Brilliant. Well, we had our insurtech week last week, and we learned so much about insurance and payments within that. So it sounds like you're doing some very interesting work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course now you're in insurance, but you know a lot about paytech, and obviously today is everything about paytech, about the modern transaction, you know. And I'm just wondering, you know, from what we've spoken about today, we've seen that everything that's happening in paytech now isn't anything new, but it was already existing even before the pandemic, you know. Because we're coming off the back of the pandemic, this event right now is looking through a very specific lens of how that shaped what we know about paytech today. So my question for you is, how do you think the pandemic has accelerated paytech?
I think really the key change that has come about as a result of the pandemic is in customer behaviour. So if I take contactless as a specific example, so contactless payments were an area that customers were extremely nervous about. So 10 years ago, 50% of all transactions were actually executed in cash. Now if we look at this from 2 years ago, during the pandemic that dropped to 17%. So we now have much wider adoption of contactless payments, digital payments, and really that change has forced people, I think, through the lens of the pandemic to actually really open their minds to digital payments. So even just in terms of the rapidity, even if I look at that from a banking sector perspective, the rapidity with which we had to move to create that change created an impetus really in how we responded to consumer behaviour and to external factors, and I think that's one of the key shifts that has come about as a result of the pandemic.
It's interesting that you mentioned consumer behaviours there and how that's sort of guiding the progress of paytech. I mean, what do you think the specific consumer behaviours are that are driving that?
So I think there's two elements there. So I think as a payments industry, there are two things that are really important to us. One is what the customer needs and wants, and I think the second is what the customer needs and wants in 10 years' time, 15 years' time. So we play a pivotal role in central infrastructure, we play a pivotal role in actually looking beyond what customers do and how customers behave today and what customers need moving forward. So really the key thing for me in the paytech world is actually, and I always look at this through the lens of digital society. So if I look at the Nordics and I look at the UK, I think we are massively behind the curve. And as a result of that, I think really the payments industry at large has a huge responsibility in terms of moving forward that whole narrative on digital society. Now, whether that's through digital identity, which we play a pivotal role in, whether that's through stablecoin, whether it's through CBDCs, actually preparing the ground for that infrastructure of the future, that metaverse that is how we will all, you know, make transactions, make payments, integrated into a more online experience. That's really the key thing for me. That's the really exciting thing about really the payments industry at large, is actually we are innovating for behaviours we haven't seen yet and for a world that we haven't seen yet, because really of our societal responsibility to be the central infrastructure and to be the network that people need.
I think that's really important what you've raised about sort of looking forward in, you know, even decades you mentioned. And I think nobody could have seen the pandemic coming, you know, and it was almost like a shock reaction from the industry in some regards. And I think it's very telling of how innovative the industry is, that it's able to sort of forecast in this way of what it's even doing today. So interestingly enough, you know, we see the UK, I mean, we are in London, I mean, it's one of the financial hubs of the world, but I don't want this to be a very London-centric my next question. But how do you think the UK has been able to position itself as a leader in the paytech space?
I think really, and I'll go back to even from a central infrastructure perspective, we've actually been leading on the central infrastructure sort of question and how we've approached it for numbers of years. So actually it was world leading, and to a certain extent I think we're losing pace there, but I think with new payments architecture we are looking to reclaim that role of central infrastructure and really being a guiding light and leading light in terms of central infrastructure. I also think that actually the UK is a massive hub of innovation and real innovative spirit, and you see that right across, not just within the fintech space but very specifically in the paytech space in terms of the amount of innovation. Now the amount of innovation I think open banking obviously has unleashed, so those kind of things that are done at a central industry perspective are really supporting a competitive environment. Now whether it's open banking, whether it's actually the approach to new payments architecture, which is going to allow that competitive layer to exist with the traditional players within the network. So I think that's it. I think the spirit of innovation has always been there. I think the industry at large is creating the conditions for it to flourish. And I think that's the really key thing. And I think we've seen here today the amount of new use cases, different ways to approach topics that have been around for many, many, many years. It's incredible. It's incredible to see. And really with new payments architecture and with that spirit of innovation baked into a lot of the topics which are happening at an industry level, it's creating the conditions for 20 more, 30 more, you know, even more than we're seeing here today.
It's a very exciting time to be in the paytech space in the UK at the moment. And I completely agree with everything that you've said, in that we sort of have a culture almost of high collaboration and high innovation.
Yeah.
I think that's what's really cemented us as one of the leading forces. Will we be one of the leading forces in 10, 15 years' time? We can only hope. But in order to get to that place, it needs to ensure that this continues to move in the way that it's currently doing so. So, yes, it's a very interesting space at the moment, and we'll have to see. You know, we'll come back in 10 years and look back at this interview and see what we got right and wrong. So yes,
absolutely. 100%.
Well, it's been a pleasure to speak to you today, Ciara. And
likewise.
I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Absolutely, you too.
Thank you very much.